Hey guys! Tonight, we begin in the kind of place where even the breeze smells fermented. You're standing on a narrow stone dock, the kind that crumbles a little with each tide. A rooster crows from a rooftop, somewhere between indignant and confused. Seagulls spiral overhead like they're chasing ghosts. It's October on a forgotten Greek island, the kind whose name doesn't show up on modern ferry routes. And you're not here for the beaches. You're here for cheese, but not the kind you buy in neat plastic squares. No, this cheese starts in the lungs of old goats, winds through midnight rituals, and ends buried in ash behind a chapel. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I'm always curious who's drifting off at 3 a.m. in Vancouver and who's wide awake at noon in Manila. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge up a path carved by centuries of bare feet and hooves, dodging the occasional overconfident goat. These goats don't run, they saunter like they own the place. You pass a stack of wooden buckets, darkened from years of goat milk and saltwater rinses. And then the morning smoke hits you. Not cigarette smoke. This is cheese smoke. An ancient ritual of herbs, olive twigs, and just enough goat dung to get the temperature right. Yes, dung. You probably won't survive this if you're squeamish, but the locals swear by it. And frankly, after a few hours inhaling the stuff, it starts smelling like tradition. A wiry man with an earring and no shoes nods at you as he fans the smoke toward a row of lumpy wheels laid on woven mats. "Let the gods taste it first," he mutters. His hands are stained yellow from saffron, or maybe turmeric. No one ever agrees. His name might be Dionysios, or maybe they just call him that because he drinks before breakfast. Around him, the village awakens. A girl hauls 2 copper pails filled with fresh milk up the hill, her sandals flopping wetly. A boy chases after her with a stick, pretending to joust. Off to the left, a group of elders crouches in a circle, passing a wedge of something crumbly and sharp-smelling. They each nibble, nod, and mutter opinions that sound like verdicts. Cheese is law here. Historians still argue whether these morning cheese councils date back to Minoan times, or were just a clever excuse to gossip without the women around. What's known for sure? Goats were introduced to the Cyclades as early as the 7th century BCE, and their milk quickly became a lifeline, especially once it was discovered that letting it curdle just right in cave humidity produced a cheese that could survive weeks, sometimes months at sea. Goats here aren't just livestock, they're family, currency, and occasional enemies. A bronze bell hangs from each neck, tuned to a different tone. You begin to notice the notes low for older nannies, bright for skittish kids. When the herd moves, it's not just footsteps, it's a melody, a walking, bleeding lullaby of survival. You pass a low wall with curious graffiti scratched into the stone. Some of it's Greek, some is Ottoman Turkish, some might be recipes. One carving shows a goat standing on a boat, tongue out, like it's mocking Poseidon. A fringe theory suggests sailors used to bring their favorite milking goat aboard for luck. Not for milk, just luck. One archaeologist insists this is how the sea milk blessing began. Though frankly, the name sounds like a forgotten indie band. You duck into a low shed where something bubbles in a cracked clay vat. The air inside is moist and sweet, thick with milk fog. On the wall hangs a portrait, faded paint on wood, of a woman holding a wheel of cheese like it's a sacred text. Below it, in careful ink, she tamed the wind. No one can agree who she was. Some say a cheesemaker who predicted the weather by sniffing curds. Others think she was just really persuasive in trade negotiations. You lean on a beam, letting the warmth and smoke and goat bell music lull you into something like reverence. Outside, the sun climbs slow over the terracotta roofs, casting the olive groves in molten gold. A lizard darts past your foot, uninterested in cheese or history, just hunting flies like every morning for the last 1,000 years. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell chimes, not for mass, just to mark the turning of the curd. Cheese time and clock time are not the same here. And just as you're about to close your eyes for a nap on a sack of straw, someone yells your name. Except it's not your name. But you turn anyway, because here, names drift like smoke, and someone always needs help carrying a wheel. You follow the shout up a narrow trail carved by bare feet and bleeding hooves. The path curves sharply, lined with herbs that brush against your calves. Wild thyme, marjoram, maybe something not entirely legal but grandfathered into local tradition. Bees zigzag drunkenly around your ankles. A donkey watches you from under a fig tree, looking vaguely offended. Up ahead, the trail opens into a courtyard hemmed by crumbling white stone walls, and there she is. They call her the Oracle, though her name's probably Eleni or Theodora, depending on whether you ask her or her jealous cousin. She's at least 90, maybe older. No one's entirely sure. Wrinkles like folded linen, hands shaped like thyme, and eyes sharp enough to cut feta. She stands over a steaming vat sunk into the earth, wrapped in a faded black shawl despite the heat. A long wooden ladle moves through the curds with deliberate rhythm, like stirring a memory. She doesn't look up. The way's shy this morning, she mutters, mostly to herself, possibly to the gods. You take a cautious step forward and notice a small, faded icon nailed to the beam above her head. Saint Spiridon, patron saint of potters, and by regional extension, cheese. Someone has drawn a goat beside him with charcoal, complete with tiny halo. The oracle flicks her ladle and a dollop of curd splashes onto a flat reed mat beside her. This batch speaks, she says. You're not sure what it says, but it smells like something between warm grass and forgotten promises. She finally glances at you. Sit! You're tall enough to reach the salt shelf. You obey. Of course, she begins to speak not directly to you, but as though narrating for an invisible audience. Which, in a way, she is. She talks about how islanders once believed cheese had a soul, that you had to stir it clockwise if you wanted dreams and counterclockwise if you feared ghosts, that the best curds always formed when there was a full moon, and at least one rooster crowing. Historians still argue whether this blend of folklore and fermentation rituals was a legitimate cult or just a highly superstitious kitchen. Some believe goat cheese was once offered to temple virgins as both sustenance and symbolic purification. Others think old women like this one just liked keeping their secrets wrapped in ceremony. She hands you a small wedge of something pale, crumbly, and suspiciously warm. Eat. Don't chew. Let it melt. It tastes like sunlight and seawater and maybe regret, but the good kind. Above her fire pit hangs a bundle of dried herbs tied with blue thread, not for flavor, for protection, against envy, spoiled milk, or the eye. She says, you ask which eye? All of them. She replies, absolutely deadpan. You notice a small wooden shelf lined with jars, each labeled with a spidery handwriting. First storm. Goat in labor. Wedding batch. Year of no figs. These aren't memories. They're cheese batches, cataloged by mood, not date. She begins wrapping a finished wheel in layers of olive leaves and linen cloth, talking about how the old routes used to pass through this very courtyard. Before ferries, she says, you followed cheese. If the cheese made it to the next island without turning sour, you knew it was safe to travel. And here's your mainstream historical anchor. Evidence shows that between the 5th and 12th centuries CE, informal cheese trails connected smaller Aegean islands via goat herders and wind-powered trading boats. Some routes were passed down orally, known only to families who guarded them like treasure maps. These networks allowed not just cheese, but herbs, brine, and even unique microbial cultures to travel, sometimes faster than politics. You ask the oracle if she remembers any of those paths. She scoffs, I forget where I left my shoes yesterday, but I remember the taste of 1938's winter batch. She pauses, and the man who helped stir it. You don't ask what happened to him. Instead, you notice her pulling out a strange tool from behind a reed basket, something between a fork and a small rake, carved from driftwood and tipped with bronze. This separates the gossip, she says. You blink. You mean the curds? She shrugs. Same thing. You're not sure if that's metaphor or warning, but the cheese seems to thicken beautifully as she works. Outside, you hear goats arguing again, bells clashing like off-key xylophones. The air smells faintly of lemon rinds and the distant sea. A fly buzzes too close, and she swats it with the kind of accuracy that only decades of practice or grudge-holding can teach. A boy runs past, barefoot and sticky with honey. Yeah. The fairy hit a dolphin again. She doesn't look up. Tell the dolphin to hit back next time. You stifle a laugh and realize it's been over an hour. The oracle hands you a folded square of waxed cloth. Inside, a triangle of soft, slightly trembling cheese rests like it's about to confess something. Take it to the spice shed, she instructs. Tell Panos the way was hopeful this morning. You nod, unsure what that even means. But here, words like that seem to unlock doors. Or flavor. As you walk away, you feel her eyes on your back. You don't turn around. You don't need to. She already knows. The path toward the spice shed winds through olive trees bent like old fishermen, and under trellises tangled with grapevines that were clearly never trained to behave. You follow a faint trail of goat droppings, a surprisingly reliable guide in these parts. The island seems to hum with a lazy rhythm the clink of a distant bell, a shout in dialect, the occasional creak of a wooden cart you never quite see. The air is drier here, sharp with crushed oregano and sun-baked stone. You reach a squat, round building at the edge of a cliff. Its faded blue door hangs a little crooked, and above it is a crude painted goat with a red pepper in its mouth. You're pretty sure that wasn't approved by any food safety board. You knock. No one answers. You knock again. Louder. Finally, the door creaks open to reveal Panos, or someone who looks like a Panos, half-aproned, barefoot, eyes like burnt molasses. He looks you up and down, squints at the waxed cloth in your hand, and nods. The way was hopeful. You nod back. He lets you in without another word. Inside, the air changes. It's suddenly cool, thick, and powdery, like the inside of a forgotten drawer in your grandmother's kitchen. Shelves line the walls, crammed with tiny jars and cloth pouches, each marked with a single, often mysterious word: ash dream, amber fig, rain crush, ship's back. Panos moves with reverence, almost like he's afraid to speak louder than the spices. You spot a glass jar filled with rust-colored powder labeled simply Tyre. He sees your glance. That's not from Lebanon, he mutters. It's named after a goat that escaped a shipwreck, right? He lifts the waxed cloth from your hands and sniffs the cheese, not in the dainty, appraising way you'd see in some Parisian boutique. He snorts it like a Roman senator inspecting the wine of his enemies. This needs cinnamon, not Ceylon. Island cinnamon, for confidence. He pulls a wooden box from under the counter, opens it, and reveals 3 identical-looking powders. He lifts one and sprinkles it gently over the cheese, whispering something in dialect that sounds like a warning to the spice itself. Mainstream historical fact time. During the Byzantine period, especially between the 9th and 11th centuries, Greek islanders did in fact import and trade rare spices, often via Arab intermediaries or through smuggled routes that bypassed formal tariffs. Cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg weren't just luxuries, they were used to preserve and embalm certain cheeses for long voyages, believed to stabilize the humors. Historians still debate whether this practice was based on medical theory or sheer superstition. Some monasteries even kept spice logs locked in scripture cabinets, next to the Gospels. Holy cheese, bathed in the sacred cinnamon of tax evasion. Panos gestures toward a carved wooden box hanging above the spice rack. That one's from a sunken Phoenician ship, he says with the casualness of someone mentioning where he parked. They found the spice sealed inside goat bladders, still dry, still potent. You raise an eyebrow. I used it once. He shrugs. Made the cheese too confident. It insulted my mother-in-law. He might be joking. Might. In the corner, a stack of ancient shipping ledgers leans precariously. One is cracked open to reveal columns of symbols, part Greek, part Arabic, part what you swear is goat hoof print. You touch one, gently, and your fingers come away dusty with something lemony. Panos notices. That's shy saffron. Only blooms if no one looks at it. Like a good daughter, you nod, pretending that makes perfect sense. In the middle of the room sits a round table where different cheeses are in various stages of powdering. Some are dusted in what looks like charcoal, one is coated in dried seaweed, another is marbled with orange threads that glow like sunset. You ask what that one is. Bee-legged batch, he replies. You choose not to ask. Instead, you watch as he folds your cheese back into its cloth, ties it with a sprig of bay leaf, and hands it back like it's a newborn. Take it to the fig grove. he says. Find the boys. They know what to do, right? The fig thieves. As you step out into the sun, blinking back the dust, you realize you've only scratched the surface of this island's food chain. Cheese here isn't just a product, it's a journey. A test. A flavor map written across limestone, salt wind, and generations of unlicensed culinary experiments. The wind picks up slightly, and you catch the scent of something sweet and fermented figs, maybe, or someone's secret stash of ouzo aging in the rocks. You glance back at the crooked door of the spice shed, then toward the trail that disappears into the grove. The next flavor awaits, and possibly a bruised shin. Depending on how territorial these kids are, the fig grove lies just beyond the ridge, where the wind quiets and the trees close in. You descend a rocky slope where wild sage brushes your ankles and old fishing nets have been repurposed as shade for fig trees too proud to grow properly. Each tree leans a little drunk, as if it's been through things and refuses to explain. The first sound you hear isn't birds. It's giggling, and not the innocent kind. It's the muffled snorts of kids planning a heist. You pause at a low stone wall. On the other side, 4 boys in sun-bleached shirts huddle like conspirators. One stands guard with a goat bell in hand, not wearing it, just holding it, as if the jingle might summon reinforcements. Another has fig juice smeared across his mouth like war paint. A third squats beside a basket lined with bay leaves, filled with what you realize isn't just stolen fruit, it's cheese. Wheels wrapped in oilcloth, hidden among the figs like contraband. You step over the wall, the lookout sees you and tenses. Raising the bell, you nod and mutter the password. The way was hopeful. They relax instantly. One kid nods, impressed. The oracle sent you. You ask if they're supposed to be guarding the cheese. No, says the smallest one. We're aging it. Right. You sit on a worn log as they offer you a split fig oozing with syrup. It tastes like sun-dried secrets. The boys explain that they hide cheese in certain caves along the eastern cliffs, where salt air and bat droppings add character. Mainstream fact. Cave aging cheese isn't just folklore. Several Greek islands use natural karst caves to regulate humidity and temperature, turning goat cheese into something halfway between food and artifact. Records from 14th century Venetian merchants mention blackened wheels from Niceros that fetch 10 times the price of mainland cheese, likely due to their mineral-rich cave blooms. But the fig gang has a twist. We only store wheels with a scar, one boy says, lifting around with a deep rind crack running across it. If it bleeds a little, it's strong enough. You don't know whether to be impressed or concerned. They take you to a hidden trail that winds downward toward the coast. Along the way, they point out markings scratched into trees and rocks, tiny goat symbols, circles with slashes, and one crude drawing of what looks like a cat riding a donkey. That means the next cave is cursed, says the leader, but we use it anyway. The trail leads to a cliff face riddled with shallow caverns, just above where the waves slap at jagged rocks. The air smells like wet stone, seaweed, and something faintly nutty. You duck into a cave behind a curtain of ivy. Inside, it's damp and quiet. Crates of cheese rest in woven baskets, some covered with figs, others with salt paste brushed in haphazard patterns. A few wheels have melted slightly into the cracks of the rock. It looks chaotic, but the boys move with care. One selects your newly spiced cheese and places it in the back corner. This one's got promise, he says. You ask how long it'll stay. He shrugs. Until it dreams. You're starting to think no one here has read a modern food safety manual. Still, you notice something, how the older wheels develop patterns that look like maps or constellations. Some even have small pebbles placed beside them, as if offerings. You ask why? That one's for my uncle who drowned, the boy says. His favorite batch was pepper brine, so we put peppercorns in that one. He visits. Another boy nods solemnly. You sit for a while in the cool dark, listening to the slow drip of cave water. The cheese rests quietly beside you, like it's waiting for something. Outside, the sea keeps hitting the rocks, over and over, like a reminder that the island isn't going anywhere. A little fringe theory. There's a rumor among islanders that the caves themselves remember flavors, that the stone absorbs the spirit of old wheels, and over time, any cheese aged here will start tasting like the island's collective memory. One scholar wrote an entire thesis arguing that specific caves could influence regional temperament, Coastal cheeses making people flirtier. Mountain cave cheeses more prone to stubbornness. No one peer-reviewed it, but the villagers nodded. As you prepare to leave, the boys give you a small paper-wrapped wedge. This one's only 4 months, the leader says, but it got scared during a storm, so it matured faster. Right? You thank them and step back out into the afternoon haze. The sun's dipping low, staining the grove in amber light. The air smells thick with fig sap and ambition. The boys vanish into the trees behind you, bells jingling as they scatter, not to run, but to hunt more caves, more wheels, more legacies. You get the feeling that these kids aren't just thieves. They're archivists, future oracles in training. And you've got a wedge of emotionally complex cheese. You follow the goat trail inland now, past fig roots clawing out of dry soil and up into the brush-covered hills. The wind shifts, cooler here, tinged with fennel and smoke. You adjust your footing on the loose stones as the trail steepens, twisting through patches of spiny shrubs and the occasional stubborn tortoise. Somewhere in the distance, a donkey brays in protest, or possibly existential dread. It's hard to tell with donkeys. You've been told to look for her. The widow. Locals don't say her name, not out of fear, but reverence. Like she's become part of the island's weather. She's known only by her habit of milking goats at night, by moonlight only, and whispering to them in tones soft as dried lavender. They say cheese made by her hands tastes like a promise broken gently. You reach a clearing as dusk falls. A small whitewashed house stands alone, surrounded by olive trees and the outline of low stone pens. No electric lights, just the flickering of an oil lamp through a curtain. And there she is, a woman in black, her scarf pulled tight around a lined face, eyes pale and steady, like someone who hasn't blinked since the last war. Her hands are already at work, steady and silent, drawing milk from a gray goat tethered loosely to a fig stump. She hums a tune that sounds like it was written before language. You approach slowly. She glances at you but says nothing. You sit. She nods. The silence isn't awkward. It's ritual. You wait. She finishes one goat, then another. Her hands move like clockwork, wooden bucket filling steadily. She doesn't use stools, just folds one leg beneath her, kneeling in the dust like a prayer. Eventually, without looking at you, she says, "Morning milk is nervous. Night milk is brave." You nod like you understand. You don't, but somehow you do. She takes the filled bucket and walks toward a wooden lean-to behind the house. Inside is her cheese-making setup. No copper, no machines, just clay bowls, woven strainers, and a fireplace built from volcanic rock. She lights a fire with dried rosemary, and the scent rises into your bones. And now the magic starts. She pours the milk into a bowl lined with crushed fig leaves and murmurs something under her breath. You can't make out the words, but they sound older than Greek. Mainstream historical fact. Fig sap has been used as a natural rennet for thousands of years, predating animal-derived enzymes. On Greek islands, especially before commercial coagulants, women often used fig twigs soaked in seawater to set curds. Believing the tree's sacred connection to fertility and death added potency, the widow stirs the milk with a branch of figwood, its tip darkened with repeated use. As the curds begin to form, she adds something from a tiny leather pouch, a grayish powder with the scent of crushed olives and dried seaweed. "Char from last harvest," she whispers. You ask what kind of charnivet. She doesn't answer. Historians still argue whether the island practice of adding ash to curds was a purification act, a preservative, or simply symbolic. Some theories suggest it represented closing a cycle, milk drawn, fire burned, earth returned. Others just think it made the cheese look cool. The mixture thickens slowly. She pours it into a woven basket lined with reeds, then presses it gently beneath a flat stone. No weights, no shouting, just gravity and time. As it sets, she offers you something in a chipped ceramic bowl, cheese from last month's moon cycle. It's soft, slightly sour, dusted with something herbal and mysterious. You taste it. It's unlike anything before. It tastes nocturnal, like wild mint and unfinished lullabies, like something you should whisper thank you to. A cat with half an ear slinks by and curls beside the fire. The widow watches the flames, then says, "I once made a cheese that cured a storm." You glance at her. She doesn't smile. You don't ask for details. Outside, the moon lifts slow above the olive trees. The goats settle one by one, their silhouettes shifting like low clouds across the hillside. The widow begins wrapping the pressed curd in strips of linen soaked in bay oil. She speaks again, barely audible. You wrap it in something sacred, or you invite dreams you can't eat. You try not to overthink that. She hands you the wrapped wheel. It's still warm, pulsing faintly with heat and scent. This one is for a journey, she says, not a table. You take it reverently. Then she stands, walks back into the dark. Gone. No goodbye. Only the hiss of rosemary ash and the bellows of a goat who sounds like it's got opinions. You leave quietly, retracing your steps down the path. The wrapped cheese warm against your chest, the wind colder now, crisper. Somewhere above, the stars blink on one by one, like they are watching, judging, smiling. Maybe, and behind you, in the hills, a fig-sweet breeze carries one last whisper. Night milk is brave. The trail back down forks without warning. One path smells of lavender and disappointment, the other of incense, candle wax, and aged rinds. You follow the latter. Soon, olive groves thin into rough stone outcrops and broken marble steps that seem far too grand for this humble hillside. The remnants of a once ornate chapel peek through twisted juniper and fallen roof tiles. A cracked bell hangs above the doorway, its clapper long gone, silence ringing louder than sound. You duck through the threshold. Inside, there's no priest, no tourists, just the ghost of ceremony and the unmistakable smell of cheese. A single stained glass window filters moonlight into hues of violet and gold across the floor. In the apse, instead of an altar, stands a slab of bay salt supporting 12 wheels of cheese, some large, some small, all slightly dusty, as if the Holy Spirit forgot to dust this morning. Then comes the chanting, not Gregorian, not rehearsed. This is the low, syncopated hum of three men in robes, possibly clergy, possibly just dramatic cheesemongers. They circle the basalt slab barefoot, swinging censers that emit not frankincense but smoke from dried goat thyme and rosemary. One breaks formation and approaches you. His robe is tied with a strip of cheesecloth. Is the offering aged? You hold out the cheese the widow gave you. He weighs it in his hand, sniffing. A fee. Nodding solemnly, this wheel is ready to listen. You're ushered forward into a semicircle of low stools. Around you, faded icons of saints stare solemnly, some with golden halos, some curiously with what appear to be wheels of cheese in hand. Mainstream historical note. By the 10th century, island churches, particularly on Naxos and Amorgos, often doubled as granaries or curing houses for community stores. Especially in times of famine or siege, food stored in chapels was believed to inherit divine protection. And there is evidence that cheese blessed during specific feast days was considered medicinal. Some texts even refer to blessing rinds to break melancholy. The priest offers you a sliver of cured goat cheese pressed with herbs and what might be dried rose petals. It's brittle, sharp, and somehow floral. He holds up a hand in a blessing gesture. Eat with your heart open. If sadness lingers after, the cheese was honest. You chew slowly. It's not sadness that lingers. It's something softer, like remembering the smell of your childhood kitchen without knowing why. The lead priest or senior cheesemonger begins to speak. Tonight, the wheels receive both the ancient and the unformed. We call on rennet, curd, and wild milk. We honor mold. We embrace the crack in the rind, the sprouting of ash, and the sacred sweat of brine. You stifle a laugh, but something in the rhythm pulls you in. They place your cheese wheel at the center of the stone and lay sprigs of saffron flower, crushed myrtle, and a single coin beside it. A candle is lit, not for light, but to warm the air just enough to awaken the aromas. One of the men speaks directly to the cheese. You were drawn beneath a black sky. You tasted fear and did not harden. You deserve a name. Another reaches into a chest and withdraws a goat-shaped brass stamp. He presses it, still warm from coals, into the side of the wheel, searing a small emblem into the rind. You ask what the symbol means. Endurance, he replies, or maybe indigestion. Depends on how it cures. They all laugh, softly, You're invited to take the blessed wheel now, officially recognized by this order. Whatever it is, and place it in the chapel's vault, a cool side chamber lined with stone shelves. Each shelf has hand-etched names: Hesychios, Thalassa's regret, the year of bees. Some wheels are decades old, fossilized into legends. Others are still soft, cloaked in wax and hope. As you slide yours into an empty slot, the priest touches your shoulder gently. She made this under the stars. You nod. Then it will keep secrets. Historians still debate whether this fusion of religious ritual and cheese preservation was born out of necessity or mystical belief. Some argue it was purely symbolic cheese standing in for the body, the ritual mimicking protection rites. Others believe communities genuinely thought certain flavors could influence fate, mood, even weather. The ritual ends without fanfare. The men return to their seats, removing their robes to reveal perfectly ordinary shirts and sandals beneath. One pulls out a bottle of ouzo, another offers almonds and dried pears. You stay for a while, sharing small bites, trading goat stories. Someone says, "I once had a cheese that made my wife dream of her grandmother for a week." Someone else, "I left a wheel buried for 3 years. When I opened it, it sang." They laugh again. You're not sure which stories are jokes and which aren't. You don't care. When you finally stand to leave, they nod in unison, like monks who've just tasted proof of divinity. You step out of the chapel into moonlight so bright, it feels painted. Your footsteps are lighter now, and behind you, 12 wheels sit in silence, bathed in smoke and memory, slowly becoming sacred. Morning creeps in through a veil of rosemary smoke and salt-heavy wind. You wake on a straw mat somewhere between chapel and coastline, unsure whether the cheese blessing was a dream or just a very pungent religious experience. But the rind mark still tingles in your hand, stamped in brass and memory. Today, you follow the scent of clay and something oddly comforting, wet goat hair and sun-warmed earth. Down the slope, past terraces of stubborn thyme and loitering chickens, lies a potter's field. Not a graveyard, an actual field where potters shape cheese vessels by hand, using a method that hasn't changed much since Homer was using metaphors to describe lunch. You spot her immediately. She's barefoot, perched on a flat stone like a bird, shaping a wide-mouthed jar with her thumbs and goat hair twine. She hums off-key and glares at the sun as if it interrupted her. You greet her. She grunts, offers you a piece of dried fig, and points to the wheel strapped across your back. "That one's been prayed over," she says. "Good." Makes the clay less arrogant. You ask if that's a thing. "Of course," she replies. Cheese absorbs pride. Clay resists it. "Right?" She continues working. Her tools are laughably simple: a bent spoon, a scrap of linen, a smooth stone for polishing. But her hands move with the kind of authority usually reserved for bishops or seasoned bartenders. Every jar she makes has a story, one for weddings, one for grief, one for when the goat refuses to cooperate. You lean closer. The clay is mixed with goat hair, real, coarse, gray fibers embedded like veins. You run a finger along the surface. It feels alive. Mainstream, historical fact. Greek islanders, particularly in the Dodecanese and Cyclades, crafted cheese vessels from porous clay mixed with organic fibers, goat hair, straw, even fish scales depending on availability and ritual purpose. These jars allowed slow evaporation, helping cool and preserve cheese. Archaeological digs on islands like Kos and Carpathos have unearthed amphorae lined with milkstone deposits, still faintly scented after centuries. You ask her how she knows when the vessel is ready. She points to a single hair sticking out. When that one twitches, the jar is done. You laugh. She doesn't. You watch as she stamps a sun symbol onto the jar's side, using a ring carved from olive wood. "This one's for aging cheese through grief," she mutters. You raise an eyebrow. She shrugs. Widows need something to do. Then she lifts the finished pot and places it beside a cluster of others under a linen canopy. The air here is thick with the scent of clay dust, dried milk, and vinegar. Some pots are sealed with wax and bay leaves. Others are open, waiting to breathe. She lets you help with the next batch. You kneel in the dirt, guided by her rough instruction. You fumble, smear clay on your leg, get barked at for thinking like a merchant. But eventually, something resembling a jar emerges. Crooked, maybe, but real. She nods. That one's for apologies. Leave it unglazed. As you work, she tells you about the woman who once shaped cheese pots so thin they could sing in the wind. Her husband left her for a baker, she explains, so she made a vessel that soured every wheel stored in it. She chuckles. Historians say it was the sea air. I say it was rage. A fringe theory. Yes, but you want that pot in your kitchen. She leads you to the back wall, where fired vessels rest inside a curved niche dug into the hillside. The temperature inside is startlingly cool. The smell earthy, fermented, ancient. One jar sits alone, labeled in red chalk, not until it forgets. You don't ask. You're learning. Before you leave, she hands you your own pot, small, simple, still warm from the fire pit. For journeys, she says, fill it only when the wind is wrong. You carry it carefully, feeling its weight and the hum of goat hair threads running beneath your palms like veins. Outside, the wind shifts. Clouds gather on the edge of the horizon. Not storm clouds, just the kind that bring stories. You turn to thank her. She's already gone, somewhere behind the linen or inside the clay. You walk back uphill, now with cheese on your back and a pot in your hand, both imperfect, both sacred. And as you climb, the sun breaks through the cloud cover in streaks of gold and dust, lighting your path like a silent benediction. The pot swings gently at your side, tethered with goat twine, humming faintly against your hip as you climb higher toward the ridge. The clay cools as the wind rises, and the moment you cross the olive tree line, the terrain changes not in vegetation, but in feel, like you've stepped onto a page of a map no one wrote down. The road here isn't a road, it's a rumor, a goat-wide scar across the hills, marked only by tufts of thyme and ancient rope fraying in the breeze. And yet, every step feels rehearsed. You're on the route with no maps. Locals speak of it in shrugs and half-jokes. Follow the cheesecloth in the wind. They say, or, when your mouth goes dry but you're not thirsty, you're close. You once asked a fisherman for directions. He simply said, turn left where the sky starts tasting like metal. Today, though, you've been given a guide. He appears just as you crest a flat stretch of rock, an old man in a red wool vest, bare feet, and one earring shaped like a tiny boat. His name is maybe Cosmos, or he just likes the sound of it. He says nothing, just hands you a strip of cloth soaked in olive oil and waves for you to follow. And so, you walk, past scrubby cliffs where goats walk tighter paths than you ever could, past whitewashed stones marked with faded ochre symbols, stars, spirals, a cheese wheel sliced in half. The wind here carries scents you can't quite name: dried oregano, crushed lemon peel, sun-baked wool, and always somewhere in the background that low, earthy tang of old brine and new curd. Cosmos stops occasionally to sniff the air or to touch a specific boulder. At one point, he lifts his head and mutters, "The rosemary's gone shy. We go right." You don't question him. Mainstream historical fact. For hundreds of years, Greek islanders relied on unmapped sea and land trails to trade not only cheese, but oils, herbs, and preserved goods. These informal trade routes, called scotini or shadow paths, were known only to certain families, and often passed on through songs or ritual walks. Many were erased during modern border demarcations, but in oral traditions, they remain vibrant. You pause at a ridge where Cosmos points out into the sea. No islands in sight, but he whispers, "There, taste the air." You inhale deeply. The breeze shifts from dry to damp in seconds. Then, faintly, yes, rosemary. And something richer, like melted fat over ash, goat butter, maybe, or very old sheep dreams. He nods. That current carries flavors. You realize he's talking about taste currents, not water, not wind. Flavor currents that travel over time and tide, connecting islands through smell and craving. Cosmos insists certain cheeses are only started when the air tastes right. Otherwise, they get confused. You reach a wind-scarred plateau marked by vertical stacks of flat stones, each one balanced precisely, impossibly. Offerings, trail signs, or just a really bored shepherd. One stack is adorned with dried cheesecloth fluttering like a ghost flag. Cosmos hands you your pot. Here, place it. You slide it into a hollow near the tallest stack. He mutters a blessing not to you, but to the air, then hands you a sliver of cured cheese from his pocket. It tastes like oranges and old sea anchors. Kalymnos, he says. You can always tell by the citrus, a fringe theory. There are whispers that cheese from certain islands retains not just the microbial signature, but emotional memory. Anger from storm seasons, lust from spring, nostalgia from wartime. One researcher claimed that Kalymnian cheese aged on citrus bark altered people's dreams. No peer-reviewed journal touched it, but islanders believed it. Cosmas taps his vest and starts walking again. No farewell, no instructions. You follow, eventually. The path descends into a small cove. The sea calm as glass. A boat waits, shaped like a walnut shell, its sail patched with what looks suspiciously like a wedding dress. No motor, just salt, wind, and a woven basket of cheese tucked into the bow. You step aboard. Cosmas hands you a bit of sea fennel and grins. To keep the journey awake, you ask where you're going. He points to a cluster of clouds on the horizon. That way, until the curd whispers. You don't argue. You just adjust the pot beside you and watch the island shrink, not vanishing but folding into your skin, like salt after swimming. And the route behind you, gone. But you can still taste it. The boat glides like it remembers where it's going. The sail flutters lazily, catching just enough wind to keep the cheese from getting bored. You sit in the stern beside the basket, now filled with bundles of cloth-wrapped curd, a handful of figs, and something that may or may not be a fermented lemon. Cosmas is gone. You are not sure if he rowed away, evaporated, or simply chose not to exist on this particular island. What remains is motion, forward, soft waves slapping the hull like half-hearted applause. Ahead, Kalymnos. The island rises from the sea like a shrugged shoulder dry, rocky, and deeply, unapologetically stubborn. A place where people cure cheese not in caves, but on rooftops, where tempers run hotter than the tiles and traditions can't be untangled from grudges. The boat drifts into a tiny port, hidden between jagged cliffs. A woman in red climbs down from a rope ladder to greet you. She gestures for silence, but not for reverence, for caution. They're arguing again. She says, "It's cheese season." You follow her up a series of steep switchbacks carved into stone, past rows of small houses stacked like goat hooves, each one with a rooftop covered in drying mats, and on every mat cheese wheels, big, cracked, golden rinds sweating under the sun like they've been accused of something. A group of men stands clustered in a courtyard, hands waving, voices rising. One points to a rind. "This is not how my great-grandmother aged hers." Another shouts, "Because she married a fisherman." They boil everything. You're ushered quickly inside a cool kitchen as the shouting intensifies. The woman hands you a glass of vinegar water and points to the window. "That's the Andrikos family," she says. "They ferment with wine." Across the alley, the Nikolakos line uses vinegar. 600 years of this. We don't go to each other's weddings. You nod politely, sipping the tart water. Mainstream historical context. Kalymnos, known historically for sponge diving, developed unique food preservation methods due to its dry terrain and long maritime traditions. Some families fermented goat cheese in terracotta jars with lemon brine and local wine lees, while others used vinegar or seawater. Recipes were fiercely guarded. Marriage between cheese-making families often led to disputes, excommunications, and, in one documented case, a wedding brawl involving cheese wheels thrown as weapons. The woman introduces herself as Philia. "I'm neutral," she says. "My parents were cousins." "Right." She lifts the lid on a large earthen jar, releasing a sharp aroma that could pass for affection or aggression depending on the mood. "This one's been fermenting for 7 years. We only open it when someone dies or reconciles." You raise an eyebrow. She smiles. "Same thing." Sometimes, she pulls out a dark wheel, nearly black along the edges, and slices it thin. You taste it. It's sour, salty, and oddly floral, like a lemon married a wildflower and then had a midlife crisis. This batch was made during the dry year. Philia explains. You can tell, all edge. No forgiveness. You ask about the rooftop wheels. She sighs. They were laid out on the same day last week. The Andrikos side used rosemary smoke and a sheep's wool blanket. The Nikolakos side left them naked in the wind. She snorts. Now, they say, ours are too aromatic and theirs are emotionally underdeveloped. You're not sure if she's joking. She leads you upstairs, where the rooftop is lined with uneven bricks, shaded only by fluttering bed sheets strung up on wires. Several wheels rest in shallow baskets. Others sit directly on woven mats. Each has a personality. One leans to the left, cracked along the center. Another bulges like it's about to confess something. Philia squats beside one and taps it gently. This one had a fight with its mother. She says, "You squat beside another. It smells like toasted lemon and regret." Outside the courtyard, the argument has escalated. A man shouts, "Your brine tastes like envy." Another responds, "Better than tasting like divorce." Followed by the dull thump of a basket hitting stucco. You duck instinctively. Philia doesn't even flinch. Last year, they called the priest to settle it. He sided with the vinegar crowd. Wineside hasn't spoken to him since. You ask why the families don't just agree to disagree. She shrugs. You ever met a goat who changed its path mid-mountain? Fair point. Fringe theory. There's a belief among some Calimnian elders that cheese holds emotional memory not just from its ingredients, but from the state of the household during its making. Cheeses pressed during family feuds ferment differently. Some believe you can taste the argument. One 1980s folklorist even tried a blind tasting of cheeses made during major domestic squabbles and claimed he could identify notes of insult and passive aggression. The wind picks up, fluttering a corner of the bedsheet and wafting the aroma of a particularly spicy wheel toward your face. You ask if the family ever sells their cheese off-island. Philia looks genuinely horrified and lets someone who hasn't earned it taste this. She stands, brushes off her knees, and hands you a wedge of something crusted with rosemary and salt crystals. This one survived last year's heat wave and a divorce. It deserves a trip. You thank her and begin descending the switchbacks again, cheese tucked carefully under your arm. The courtyard below has gone quiet. For now, you glance back once at the rooftop, where the wheels continue to sweat, harden. And remember, sometimes it's not the making that defines the cheese. It's what it lived through. The ferry to the next island doesn't come on a schedule. It comes when the wind permits, when the goats have been milked, or when the captain sobers up, whichever happens first. So you wait, and in waiting, you find him, the lighthouse keeper. He doesn't live in the lighthouse. Of course, that structure has long since been claimed by pigeons, tourists, and the occasional teenage elopement. No, he lives just below it, in a stone house built partially into the cliffside. From a distance, the place looks like a barn swallowed by the hill. Up close, it smells like salt, lemon peel, and ambition. You don't knock. You just arrive. He greets you without surprise. A bearded man with sea-colored eyes, boots patched with bits of fishing net, and the posture of someone who once commanded something far larger than cheese. You've brought the wrong brine, he says immediately. You glance down at your cheese bundle. He sighs, then gestures for you to follow. Inside, the space is tight but orderly. Nets hang from beams. Barrels line the walls, each labeled not by date, but by tide. Full moon drift, Black Sea push, North hiss, September. In the center, a table scarred by knives, stained with herbs, and currently supporting a bowl of olives and a wedge of something faintly green. He dips his fingers into a nearby barrel, tastes the liquid, and nods to himself. You can't just dunk cheese in seawater and expect poetry. He says, it needs to be listened to. You realize this man is not joking. Mainstream historical fact. Seawater brining was a common practice across Greek island communities, part preservative, part seasoning. But some brine makers took the practice to extremes, developing their own curing philosophies. Diaries from 18th century lighthouse keepers describe brine infused with wind direction and barrels sealed during specific moon phases to promote ideal microbial development. The lighthouse keeper opens a small chest and retrieves a vial of clear liquid, first wave of spring. He explains, collected before the sun touched it. I only use it for cheese made during grief. You ask what's in the barrel marked North hiss, September. He grins. That one's for angry wheels. He unwraps the cheese bundle you've brought from Kalymnos and sniffs it. Too many arguments. Needs softening. He dips it in a pail filled with brine that smells like lemon and old coins. Let it sit. he says, until it remembers who it is. You sit with him on the porch while the cheese floats in silence. The sea below crashes rhythmically, and he tells you about how he used to run trade routes between the smaller islands, cheese in one direction, olives in the other, always with a barrel of seawater strapped to the mast for balance. Not ballast. He clarifies. Personality. You laugh. He doesn't. Fringe theory. Some coastal sailors believed cheese cured at sea developed what they called panoia breath, or soul, that could only emerge when the brine carried both the taste of movement and the silence of the deep. One captain swore his cheese spoke more kindly after drifting through a thunderstorm. No formal proof, but sailors insisted the sea taught everything, even curds. Back inside, the keeper retrieves the cheese, now glistening, softened, altered. He slices a sliver and hands it to you. You taste it. It's not what it was on the rooftop. The bitterness is rounded. The salt no longer aggressive. The flavor has perspective. He nods. It's ready. Then he leans in, lowers his voice. There's one more place. You glance up. He points to the southernmost islet barely visible on the horizon. No ferries go there. No maps bother with it. But if you sail at dawn, the tide'll carry you. And if you're carrying cheese that's been blessed, buried, fermented, and forgiven. He pauses. All the morning, the island might let you in. You ask what's there. He smiles, not kindly, not unkindly. The last brine. The wind picks up. The clouds shift. You realize the cheese in your bag has changed again, somehow, as if preparing. The keeper hands you a sealed pouch. Take this, he says. Open it only when the sky turns copper. You nod. No more questions. You descend back toward the harbor. The ferry still isn't in sight, but the sea has changed its mood, and your cheese is ready for whatever comes next. The boat you find isn't a ferry. It's a glorified raft with dreams of being a ship, patched sails, a hull painted with symbols that could either be protective runes or just someone's artistic tantrum. The captain is missing a tooth, a button, and most of his patience. You hand him a coin. He sniffs it, then nods toward the horizon. That way, where the cicadas argue with the stones, perfectly clear. You set sail just after dawn. When the light is pink and everything smells like possibility or fish, hard to tell, the island appears suddenly. No fanfare, no sea birds circling dramatically, just a gentle swell, a curl of white rock, and a tiny stretch of shoreline the size of a generous napkin. No harbor, no port, just a trail. You follow it. It winds upward through fields of golden grass dotted with lichen-covered stones. At first, it's silent. Then, slowly, a sound emerges. Not waves, not wind, cicadas. Thousands of them, singing with all the drama of an opera set on fire. You step carefully, each stone radiating heat, each patch of earth brittle with sun. And then you see them, the curing stones, flat slabs arranged in rows, each topped with a cheese wheel, most covered by baskets of reeds and cheesecloth held in place with rocks. The air here smells like heat and history. Sharp, salty, smoky. A woman in a wide-brimmed hat lifts a cloth and nods approvingly. It's cracking perfectly. You ask if the cheese is in danger. No, she says. It's just remembering something unpleasant. You introduce yourself. She laughs. No names here, only textures. Right. She gestures for you to sit beneath a crooked fig tree. The shade is scant, but the breeze carries the scent of herbs and something deeper like sun-warmed stone, or the breath of an old animal. She brings you a cheese wheel fresh off the stone. Its surface is fissured, sun-bleached, and slightly oily. She slices it open, and you watch as steam escapes. Actual steam. From a cheese, you taste it. It's sharp, but mellow. Dry, but with a strange juiciness. You taste citrus, ash, maybe grief, maybe sunstroke. She nods. That one cured during the rockfall. You blink. She points to a scar along the cliff. 3 summers ago, no one died. But the cheese cracked, and it carried the memory, mainstream, historical fact. On smaller, rocky islands in the southern Aegean, open-air cheese curing was common practice. Locals used heated stones and natural sun to slowly dry and age cheese wheels. The technique created unique flavor profiles, Some intentionally induced cracks in the rind to encourage microbial blooms. These cheeses often had short shelf lives, but were prized for their intensity and strange depth of flavor. Archaeological remnants suggest curing slabs were arranged based on wind patterns and family territory. She invites you to walk the rows. Each stone tells a story. One batch is curing on a slab split by lightning decades ago. The cheese placed there is for brave unions, people who marry without their family's blessing. Another rests on a bed of old fishing nets and smells faintly of sea brine and almonds. That one's for those who wait, she says cryptically. You ask how long the cheese stays here. She shrugs. Some leave after a week. Others stay until the right cicada calls. You nod slowly, pretending that explains anything. Fringe theory. There are oral traditions across the Greek islands suggesting that insect songs, particularly cicadas, play a role in fermentation. Some say the vibration helps activate or calm certain microbes. Others claim that cheese aged during specific insect choruses creates livelier dreams. One 19th century priest wrote that cheese left to cure through the second song of cicadas would cause visions of boats long sunken. You squat beside a cracked wheel resting on a charred board. What's this one for? She crouches beside you, eyes narrowed. That one was made during silence. You tilt your head. There was a week when the cicadas stopped. No reason, just once. The cheese made during that time? Well, we don't open it. You back away politely. As the sun climbs higher, the smell of hot cheese and cracked stone intensifies. Sweat beads on your forehead. The woman offers you a cloth soaked in vinegar and bay leaf. You press it to your neck. You realize the cheese you've carried brined, fermented, stamped, softened is now vibrating slightly, whether from heat or some deeper tension. You're not sure. The woman sees it too. She smiles. It's almost ready for the wind. And as she says it, a gust rises suddenly across the field. The cicadas pause, just for a beat, just long enough to let the cheese breathe. You leave the stones behind, not because you want to, but because the cheese tells you to. Or maybe it's the wind, or the silence between cicada songs. Either way, your feet start moving again. And soon, you're winding up a narrow trail toward the hills, where the grasses grow tall and the sky shifts into a deeper shade of indifference. You reach the edge of a plateau dotted with broken walls and skeletal windmills. Most are collapsed, ribs of wood jutting out like ruined prayers, all except one. It still stands, barely, its blades squealing faintly in the wind like a goat with secrets. And beneath it, a man, or rather, half of one. He sits on a blanket, his single leg stretched out before him, his crutch resting beside a loaf of bread and a knife with a handle carved from horn. He's sundark, wrapped in layers, and wears a wide-brimmed hat that looks like it's been chewed on by time. His smile, however, is bright and fast, like a match struck in darkness. You took the long route, he says, nodding at your cheese bundle. You sit without asking. He hands you a slice of bread. It's dry, crunchy, salted with wind. You ask if he lives up here. He chuckles. The goats think I do. From below, a small herd watches you both, ears twitching, eyes wary, bell tones low and discordant. You notice none of them will step near the windmill. You ask why. They remember, he says, better than people. You wait. He finally speaks again. There was a storm, long ago, the kind that eats your name and spits out a new one. The goats ran. The windmill turned backwards. The cheese changed. He leans in. We buried that batch. Mainstream historical fact. The Meltemi, a strong seasonal wind that blows across the Aegean from the north, has long influenced agricultural and culinary rhythms. Entire harvests were timed around it, and cheesemakers sometimes suspended production during the peak of its fury. Some families believed Meltemi spoiled curds brought bad luck or soured marriages. Others leaned in, producing sharp, dry cheeses aged against the wind like a dare. You ask if people still make cheese here. Not during Meltemi, he says, not anymore. Then he gestures to a leather pouch slung across his shoulder. But I keep the memory. He unrolls a cloth bundle to reveal a small round barely a palm's width, dark and cracked like lava. This one was made the day the wind shifted without warning. You smell it. Ash, lemon, something medicinal. He slices it thin, handing you a shard. It crumbles, then melts. You taste iron, salt, and something raw, like the edge of fear turning into something edible. He watches your face. It tasted worse before I lost the leg, he says. You blink. He shrugs. Pain seasons everything. You sit together a while in the growing heat, watching the goats nervously skirt the base of the mill. One gets too close, wine picks up, and it bolts, like it heard its own name shouted by the dead. Fringe belief time. On this island, some say windmills retain sound specifically fear, that when goats panic, it's because they hear storms that no longer exist. There's even a theory that wind-carried frequencies interact with the microflora in cheese, creating unpredictable flavor mutations. Most scholars roll their eyes, but oddly, microbiologists haven't fully ruled it out. The man wraps his cheese again and leans back, hat tilted forward. Not all cheese wants to be eaten, he murmurs. You glance at the bundle in your bag. The one that's traveled through smoke, brine, fig caves, midnight milkings, and one very persistent argument. It's warming, breathing, almost yours, he says, eyes still closed. It's ready for saffron. You ask where. He points across the sea toward a jagged outcropping barely visible in the haze. You'll know it when the sky looks like honey and ash. You ask his name. He shakes his head. No need. Just don't feed the windmill. As you stand, the wind picks up, catching the old blades. They spin slowly backward. You hear a low groan from the frame, almost a sigh. The goats scatter. You tighten the strap on your cheese, sling your clay pot higher on your back, and begin your descent. The wind follows, soft at first, then louder, but the cheese is calm, which is more than you can say for the sky. The descent takes hours, though you stop checking. Time loses its grip somewhere between the windmill hill and the edge of the world. You follow a path marked not by signs but by what it avoids: cracked stones, fig branches bent east, a ribbon of saffron cloth tied to a cypress. Eventually, the path narrows into a staircase carved straight into the cliff. Each step feels older than the last, smooth with wear, heavy with purpose. At the bottom, a carved wooden door, sun-bleached, iron-ringed waits, half swallowed by the rock face. You knock. The knock echoes down the stone, and then silence. A long one. Just as you consider turning back, the door creaks open with a sigh like it's been holding its breath since Byzantium. A monk stands there, hooded, barefoot, robe the color of rusted saffron. He says nothing, just gestures you in. The air shifts instantly. Cool, dry, sweet with fermenting herbs and a hint of candle smoke. The room is carved straight into the rock, the walls lined with narrow alcoves, each holding a single wheel of cheese, a clay tablet, or both. Faint chanting echoes from somewhere deeper inside, or maybe it's just the stones humming. You follow the monk through winding corridors. Murals line the walls, scenes of goats under moonlight. Women stirring cauldrons with halos, monks pressing curds with crosses made of olive branches. Finally, you reach a chamber lit only by a circular opening in the ceiling. The sunlight spills onto a low stone table. Beside it, a bowl of warm oil, a stack of folded cheesecloths, and a small dish filled with brilliant red saffron threads. The monk gestures to your bag. You hesitate, then unwrap the cheese. It glows faintly in the filtered sun-brined, cracked, softened, marked, smoked, remembered. It is no longer what it was. He nods, dips his fingers into the oil and presses them gently against the rind. Then, using a bundle of saffron threads, he begins to press them into the cracks one by one, chanting under his breath. The process is slow, sacred, hypnotic. The threads disappear into the cheese like veins, gold bleeding into history. Mainstream historical fact. In several Greek island monastic traditions, saffron was used not just as flavor but as a symbol of divinity, of healing, of completion. Saffron was often pressed into sacred foods during major transitions: death, birth, betrayal, revelation. In rare rituals, cheeses were infused with saffron before being offered to hermits or pilgrims as edible prayers. You watch, silent, as the monk wraps the wheel in soft linen and seals it with olive oil and wax. Then, unexpectedly, he hands it back. You fumble, surprised. It's done. He nods. But before you can speak, he places a second package in your hand. Smaller, heavier, wrapped in black cloth. He says only this: eat yours. Bury this one. You open your mouth. He raises a hand. The mountain knows where. You bow? He bows lower, then vanishes into the stone halls, leaving you blinking in the sudden stillness, holding two destinies, one to taste, one to plant. Fringe theory. Some traditions speak of burial cheeses, wheels infused with oils and saffron, then buried under specific trees or stones. These were never eaten. Instead, they were believed to carry messages to the earth, to gods, or to memory itself. Some claim they absorb emotions left unresolved. Others say they sprout dreams. You step back into the light. The sea is burning with late afternoon gold. The cliffs hum beneath your feet. You begin to climb, one wrapped cheese strapped to your back, the other pressed tightly to your chest. You don't know where yet, but you'll know it when you feel the ground soften. The monks say the mountain whispers when it's ready, and if it accepts your offering, you won't hear it, but the cheese will. You climb with purpose now. The air is thinner, the trail less forgiving. Sharp pebbles lodge into your soles like forgotten promises. The mountain doesn't rise so much as it unfolds, step by quiet, crumbling step. You stop once to drink from a spring hidden beneath a flat rock. The water tastes faintly of copper and thyme. You wet the black cloth bundle and watch as the droplets run down it in slow rivulets, like the cheese is sweating before its burial. You keep going, not up, not quite, but across. The trail curls around a wide bluff where tufts of sagebrush sway, and ahead you hear it laughter, singing, a drum, maybe, the rhythmic clapping of hands. You emerge onto a ledge crowded with bodies, dozens of people, maybe more. Old men with crowns of olive branches, children with goat horns strapped to their heads, women dressed in mismatched aprons, slapping tambourines and tossing flower petals into the air like confetti made from scent. You've stumbled into a festival. No signs, no invitation, but they welcome you with nods and wine-stained smiles. Someone hands you a slice of bread smeared with something sweet and smoky cheese, mixed with honey and burnt fig. This year's last wheel, a man says proudly. You ask what they're celebrating. He grins. The crumbled one. Right. You watch as a wheel of cheese, enormous, sun-dark, cracked through like ancient pottery, is carried into the center of the clearing, laid atop a wooden slab like a sacrificial offering. It's old, sharp, aromatic enough to bring tears to your eyes. A priest-like figure steps forward, robe fluttering, feet bare, voice booming. We gather not to eat, but to end. The crowd hushes. He lifts a hammer carved from goat horn and lemonwood, holds it above his head, and brings it down, crack straight through the wheel. A cheer erupts. Fragments fly. Some are caught in fabric. Others land in wine cups. Children scramble for the crumbles like it's candy. A woman beside you leans in. We break the last wheel before it breaks us. You ask if the cheese was cursed. She laughs. No, just heavy. Old cheese carries things. Mainstream historical fact. In certain cyclotic traditions, especially on remote islets like Anafi and Folegandros, villagers held end-of-season festivals where the oldest remaining wheels of cheese were ceremonially broken. Some say it prevented illness. Others believed it symbolically released the memory embedded in long-aged curds. There are 17th-century travel journals describing crumbling rites that included poetry, dancing, and wine, but made no mention of why they were done. You're handed a small shard of the broken cheese. You nibble. It's strong, bitter, smoky, and strangely warm. You imagine it remembers every storm, every silence, every cracked hand that turned it. A dairy archive. The dancing begins again, slow at first, then wild. People stomp the earth. Wine is passed in cracked ceramic cups. Children play tag using fig leaves as masks. One girl stops in front of you and solemnly taps your forehead with a cheese rind. You are now part of the rite. The music shifts, softer now, a long, droning flute. The mood changes with it. And then, the burial. Two men carry what remains of the shattered wheel up a short trail to a stone hollow under an old olive tree. It's shallow, almost ceremonial in shape. They lay the rind fragments down like relics, pour wine over them, press figs into the cracks. One whispers something too soft to hear. The other sprinkles ashes. You watch from a respectful distance. Then, quietly, you reach for the black cloth in your bag. No one stops you. No one watches. You step forward, The hollow feels warm like it's been waiting. You kneel. The cheese in the black wrap pulses softly, its scent mingling with fig and ash and sunset. You place it gently beside the last wheel's remains. Then cover it in olive leaves. Then soil. Then silence. No one speaks. Because somehow, everyone knows fringe theory. Burial cheeses were sometimes used as symbolic endings, either to mourn something unspeakable or to honor something untranslatable. Some believe these cheeses were never intended for human consumption, that they fed the land, or dreams, or the idea that something sacred can exist and not be used. As you return to the circle, the music picks up again, gentler this time. A slow lullaby hummed by grandmothers and sunburned men alike. Someone presses a cup into your hand. You drink. It's sour, warm, and comforting. You feel lighter. Maybe because of the cheese. Maybe because you let it go. You wake before dawn. Not because of the cold, though the mountain air has a way of curling around your bones like smoke, but because something in you stirs. Not hunger, not urgency, just an invitation. You walk alone now, away from the clearing, from the crumbled wheel, from the music that still echoes faintly in the stone. The trail isn't marked. It's felt. Your feet find it before your eyes do. There's a small ledge just beyond the last olive grove, where the sea reveals itself all at once, an infinite mirror, stretching west, tinged pale gold and sleepy violet. The horizon breathes, slow and steady, and the cheese on your back, your wheel, the one you've aged and carried and scented and saffroned, hums. Not literally, but somehow, undeniably, you unwrap it slowly. The linen cloth feels different now, softer, streaked with oil and time. The rind has darkened, cracked in patterns that look like veins or river systems. It's no longer just cheese, it's a recording of wind, of salt, of fig-thieving children, of whispered blessings, and angry families, and laughter laced with vinegar. You sit on the rock ledge, cross-legged, and place the cheese before you like a holy text, and for the first time you eat. The first bite is sharp, almost defensive. Then, surrender. Smoke, lemon, brine, a strange sweetness from the fig cave, a distant burn from the saffron. You chew slowly, you breathe, and you remember everything not in detail, but in texture. The silence under the chapel arch, the splash of seawater collected at dawn, the warmth of a widow's fire, the twitch of goat bells dancing through time. Mainstream historical fact. Greek island cheeses weren't just food, they were edible records. Each batch carried the climate, the forage, the mood of the animal, and the state of the maker. Anthropologists now study aged cheese wheels like tree rings mapping droughts. Wind changes, even social unrest from their chemical composition. Some wheels, cracked and cured under rare conditions, are considered artifacts. You don't speak, because no words would respect what the cheese has become. A story too quiet to be written. A poem pressed into curd. You finish the wedge. You lean back. The clay pot you've carried all this time sits beside you, untouched. You lift it carefully, unstopper the lid. Inside, nothing, just the smell of everything. You pour a few drops out onto the stone, and the wind takes it like an offering. Then, without ceremony, you set the pot down and walk away. There's no applause, no trumpet of goats, no chant, just a breeze, and the sea, and the knowing. Fringe theory. Some islanders believe that once a cheese has completed its journey, if it has passed through the right hands, the right trials, the right silences, it no longer exists, that its final flavor is a form of disappearance, that those who taste it won't crave more, but remember less, not as loss, but as lightness. You descend the mountain. You greet no one, but the air around you feels kinder. Somewhere behind you, the windmill creaks once. A goat bell tinkles far off, like punctuation. And in the village, someone starts a new batch, under moonlight, with figs, and maybe a little laughter. And now, you rest. The trail fades behind you, softened by memory and the taste of salt air. Your limbs are heavy, but not burdened, just gently worn, like the rind of a wheel that's been turned too many times to count. You settle into stillness, letting the last warmth of the cheese linger on your tongue. Your lips, your breath, you don't need to understand it. Not anymore. You've walked where goats refused, listened to winds older than maps, eaten the silence of saffron. You did not just learn a history tonight. You tasted it. You carried it. You let it go. The fire from the widow's hearth still flickers somewhere deep in your ribs. The monk's chant hums in your bloodstream. The laughter of fig thieves curls at the edge of your dreams. Even the windmill haunted and wheezing feels a little quieter now. Like it, too. Finally exhaled. And in the cradle of the night, under stars that blink like breadcrumbs across a sleeping sea, you close your eyes. The cheese is gone, but the weight it lifted, still rising. So inhale. Let your breath stretch. Let your chest fall soft and slow. You are no longer walking. You are no longer searching. You are simply drifting. Like brine across a bay. Like saffron in warm milk. Like goats in the dark. Bells chiming faintly, gently, endlessly. Far away from clocks. Far away from maps. Far away from everything. Except peace.